Why we are here today to share our knowledge with you is because cannabis is becoming legalized on a global level, and we have to deal with a few factors as we talk about global legalization. The first is, cross-border product transfer and cross-border fund transfer. And while we'll focus on the fund transfer, it is something that's going to be occurring in the near future as far as product crossing borders. So let's take a look at the United States here. You can see from this map that it's not all the same color, and the thing to take a look at would include that there are 17 blue states, and those states are where recreational is actually legal. There are 36 where medicinal is legal, and this also includes, these numbers do include territories as well. There are 11 states where actually CBD, a derivative of cannabis, is legal. And then the interesting thing is that there are only two states where there is no legalization of some sort. So as you take a look at this map, what you really need to gather from this is that not all states are equal, and that there are different regulations in each of those states, and there are different legalization. But the fact that there are only two states holding out on any type of legalization means they're all moving in the same direction. So, is there legislation on the docket anywhere that's going to help the situation as far as legalization goes and manage the illegality at the federal level? There are. The first one we have on the docket is Safe Banking Act, and this one's been introduced and reintroduced, approved by the House and reapproved by the House, and it really allows for the ability, it reduces the legal risk for bankers in the industry, and it says that they can't prosecute us just for banking cannabis. What it doesn't relieve is the BSA obligation that we have to hold ourselves accountable to. It doesn't relieve the penalties that are involved with BSA. It also precludes any third party from excluding us from the financial system, which is really quite a big deal because insurers don't necessarily want to insure financial institutions, and the Federal Reserve is not thinking about this the same way across the country, and some will bank it and some will not. The States Act is simply saying that the states have the power to enact legal cannabis regulations, and the federal government will not interfere with them. So it's States Act properly named. The last one that's out there that's gained some momentum is the MORE Act. And the MORE Act is actually taking it a step further and dealing with the tax treatment, which is something we'll speak about a little later, and incorporating a federal tax. There are about 1,200 different bills out there and being worked on at this point in time. Some of them go as far as to remove cannabis from the Schedule I and totally legalize it.
U.S. law requires financial institutions to detect and prevent money laundering and to assist the federal government by reporting suspicious activity and file suspicious activity reports, also known as SARs. These are their obligations under the Bank Secrecy Act of 1970. Suspicious activity can involve human and sex trafficking, fraud, drug smuggling and drug trafficking, elder abuse. Activity involving marijuana, both state legal and illicit, must closely be monitored by financial institutions and properly reported to the federal government. Now, financial institutions must also file certain reports under the BSA regarding the daily aggregate cash deposits or withdrawals of $10,000 or more. Now, failing to maintain a Bank Secrecy Act compliance program to properly address the risk of money laundering can result in regulatory, civil, or criminal exposure, not only for an institution, its officers, as well as for the individual making the deposits. The Money Laundering Control Act, it's also against the United States law to launder the proceeds of certain crimes, such as those that I just mentioned under the BSA. And here again, financial institutions have an obligation under the Bank Secrecy Act to detect and report suspicious activity. For the first part of the Money Laundering Control Act, Section 1956, in layman terms, it's illegal to conceal the source of proceeds generated from the sale of marijuana, both state legal sales and, of course, the black market. We may see instances where state legal, what appears to be fully compliant cannabis businesses cannot secure a transparent banking relationship. So they, like the black market, create LLCs, such as management companies, to disguise the source of the proceeds. Financial institutions detect this activity and they file those suspicious activity reports, those SARs. Section 1956 of the Money Laundering Control Act involves the downstreaming of the cloaked funds through the financial system. This too is obviously illegal. You can see the penalties on the slide here are severe and can be against the depositor as well as the institution.
So why, if cannabis is illegal at the federal level, would we be willing to jump into cannabis banking and bank the industry? Well, this guidance that was issued in 2014 from FinCEN actually provided expectations and guidance on how we could bank cannabis industry with additional BSA activities. And while it's still federally illegal when they issued this, and still is, the fact remains that they knew the money was getting into the system one way or another, and they preferred a transparent banking system that was monitored by the federal government. So this gave us a venue to actually move into cannabis banking, trust that the government knew we were doing it, to be transparent with them, file the reports, and everybody was able to learn about the cannabis industry and the flow of funds together. So how many banks and credit unions are actually doing this? Well, this will show you at this point in time, there were as high as 747 that were doing it, but they're down to 684. So why the decline in banks when it should be probably increasing in numbers? Because I would imagine that many banks and credit unions would get into this and find out that the BSA obligations were pretty severe and required a lot of resources, and then found themselves not being able to handle the resources necessary, or maybe not handling the resources because it was too complicated. So I would imagine they would get out of the actual banking of cannabis because of that. However, at the same time, while the number of financial institutions has declined, the number of SAR reporting and CTR reporting has increased. So those who did stay in are probably increasing the size of their programs now that they've made the decision to stay in cannabis banking. So what have we done? In our 7th year, we have over 500 accounts. We have over 300 licensed and 150 ancillary. And the important factor here is that we have an ancillary program, because many times the ancillary accounts get ignored and the licensed get all the activity. But in fact, if any type of money laundering is going to happen, it's probably going to happen in those ancillary accounts versus the licensed. The resources necessary for this number of accounts, we have 25 to 30 employees doing nothing but cannabis banking all the time. And I will show you why here. We have the oversight of 300 retail, more than 300 retail operations, grow, and 100 manufacturers and distributors. And now they're getting additional licenses in states where they have actual social clubs that can be licensed, and they have drivers that can be licensed. So every time we turn around, there are new types of licenses popping up that we have to then learn and then mitigate the risks accordingly. Report processing, here we go. This is the thing that's very difficult to manage and yet very important according to BSA. We probably average nearly 1,000 BSA reports a month, and that's time consuming because the reports that we file have to be pertinent to law enforcement. And if they aren't, you're going to find yourself in trouble as a financial institution not spending sufficient time. Lastly, the industry has changed so much that we have ended up banking our clients in 15 states at any given time, because the merger and acquisition strategies inside the cannabis industry is facilitating the need to bank them in several states and not leave them unbanked in any one state, because BSA requires us to know all their money. A few other considerations that you should take a look at if you're thinking of going into this and banking this industry would include sufficient commercial software to get into the industry and serve these companies. Recruiting talent, it's one thing to find BSA talent, it's another thing to find cannabis banking talent that goes a step further than just normal BSA. AML systems. There has to be a system in place to help you track that number of reports and file those numbers of reports. Concentrations. Smaller financial institutions, and I'll be the first one to say that when we got into it, we probably didn't know what we didn't know, and we probably shouldn't have gotten into it because of the size of our organization at that point in time. But you can only carry so much of any type of one business on your balance sheet. If you consider this as money service business plus, you will understand that not a lot of financial institutions actually bank money service businesses, and this would be considered money service businesses on actual steroids. And then, of course, the resources, as I touched on, you're going to need a lot more resources to do nothing but cannabis and specialize in cannabis banking. On the deposit level, and this would be cash flow, not deposits. So we started very small and went very methodically through the process. We started with $153 million in year one. We did not have the goal of profitability. We had the goal of doing it right and staying in the business and being able to continue to bank this business and learn it. And you can see in the last year, in 2020, we reached a $3 billion mark, just in excess of $3 billion of money that we flow through the financial institution, and that we have to validate and monitor and ensure that we understand that money is legitimate.